My name's Eric Wing. I'm one of the technical leaders here at Trend Micro. I want to welcome everybody to our continuing threat education series. Today, we're going to be talking about PrintNightmare and vulnerability exploits. We have two very special speakers with us. We have Mayra Fuentes and Cory Ford. Mayra is our senior threat researcher, and Cory is our senior manager in threat response. So they're going to be going into PrintNightmare in the vulnerability exploit market, and why vulnerabilities are valuable to threat actors that are out there. As part of the kind of standard format here, we also have people that are monitoring the both the chat and Q&A. So please feel free to utilize both those tools. We'd like to know you're there. If you have any questions, we will answer them. Hopefully we can do that live. If not, we'll certainly follow up with you. But do take advantage of that. And with that, let me go ahead and introduce our first speaker here, which is going to be Cory. So hopefully you're there, Cory.
I'm here.
Okay, I'll go ahead and stop my share. And he tells us that he got a haircut and everything for this. So hopefully he'll turn his camera on. So,
Like most people, I've got I had the COVID hair before this, so I had to have my wife cut it beforehand because I couldn't get a barber's appointment for like a month. Let me share my screen. I'm pretty sure I need to swap this, right?
Yes, or no, that's correct. You got it now.
This is it now?
Yep, you're good.
All right, so like Eric said, my name's Cory Ford. I am Senior Manager of Threat Research, Threat Response, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same. Actually manage the team that writes the filter rules for the tipping point device, for the Trend Micro tipping point device. And I've got Scott Graham on here. He's my team lead. He'll be answering Q&A, so feel free to send any questions you want. He's just as knowledgeable as I am. All right, so first thing about PrintNightmare, let's talk about how an Oday is born. So the way that this vulnerability worked is, this was really nice. The discoverer actually worked with Microsoft to fix the vulnerability for CVE 2021-1675. This was a local RCE vulnerability in print spooler. Followed all of the correct processes. He's a good researcher. So when it was patched, the discoverer released a blog with POCs, waited several weeks, as a responsible discoverer would, and then released POCs for the vulnerability. So at that point, one of the POCs that he released was actually for a remote version of the attack. He believed it was the same vulnerability and that it was patched out. He did this in good faith. He was not trying to be malicious. So then Microsoft is like, whoa, this is a different code path. This is not the same vulnerability. Here's the new CVE. This is 34527. Like I said, this was an honest mistake. It happens. Maybe it could have been prevented if he checked to make sure that it was fully patched out, but it was an honest mistake and these things happen. So all is forgiven. Here's what makes this vulnerability worse than most of the print spooler bugs you're going to see. It's only marked as a CVSS of 8.8, which if you just looked at that, you'd say, okay, that's bad, but it's not the worst thing. We see tons of 10s every day. This one's bad. It's RCE. It has no interaction required, runs at system level privilege. The exploit is insanely easy to pull off, and it's network exploitable. The worst thing about it, though, is that it affects every single version of Windows ever. The Microsoft, like I said, released a patch for this bug, but the patch requires manually editing 4 additional registry keys. I don't know about y'all. I haven't even done that at my home computer yet. I can't imagine doing it for an entire company. So even if someone did want to go in and do that, the suggested patch requires disabling remote printing or all printing altogether if you want to do all 4. A lot of people are considering this to be a workaround. This is not a patch. Let's be honest about that. That's not acceptable for anyone. I can't even do that in my own home. One other thing that is interesting about this is there's a lot of confusion with this. If you go out online and start looking up PrintNightmare, you're going to get the CVE 2021-1675, which is local and fully patched. The patch works for that one. The actual vulnerability is 34527. But pretty much everyone, including Trend Micro, is listing both CVEs for this since there was so much confusion at the start. It just makes sense to kind of hedge our bets and list them both just to cover all the bases. So I mentioned how everything played down. So we just wanted to show a timeline of what that looked like. So the original patch for 1675 came out on June 8th, which is the normal Patch Tuesday release. And you can see June 29th is when the researcher actually released all of his POCs in his blog. 21 days later, that's plenty of reasonable time for people to patch. I say that, maybe it's not. Y'all would know better than me. But in research terms, that's enough time. On July 1st, Microsoft acknowledged that one of the POCs released was, for 34527, it was remote, completely different bug. On the same day, Trend Micro released our patch coverage as well. So if you had our filters or any of our products, patches were released on that day. So 7 days later, Microsoft releases a patch for the actual remote bug. We're going to put patch in quotes because that's clearly a workaround. As of today, there is still no full patch. Microsoft is being very quiet on the bug. I think they're just trying to ignore it or not call a lot of attention to it, not ignore it. I'm sure they're working hard to get a better fix out. And we're still seeing new variants. I should have put variants there in quotes. You can pretty much assume everything for the next couple of months is going to be in Print Spooler is going to be assumed to be part of PrintNightmare. And that's very much not the case. Almost all of those bugs are going to be local. You don't see a whole lot of remote bugs in Print Spooler. All right, so I'll give a little bit of information on how this bug actually works, just so you can see how dead simple it is to actually exploit. So literally all you have to do is make an RPC call. So if you've got Samba SMB, right, you make an RPC call to the print spooler spools S. And then you use any of these three operations work. The add printer driver, the add async add printer driver, or the async enum printer drivers. And I will call out that these are legitimate operations to be run, but in practice, we don't see them used very often. I do have one customer who's reached out to me and said they were able to track this down. They've seen one hit of this exactly, and it was a legitimate use where someone was trying to add a printer. They got moved to a new location. We're adding a printer. So it does happen, but it's pretty rare. So she feels pretty good about that. The only thing that's a little bit annoying about this is everything. So at this point, you call these and then you send it a printer driver. And it says, hey, look, here's the driver for this printer. Let's just install this. No checking done. It just assumes that it's a legitimate printer driver and installs it. Unfortunately, that happens in an encrypted stub. So we can't actually see what drivers are being sent. So we can't inspect those. This sort of DLL hijacking is very common. So Nucor malware uses it. APT19 uses this, APT23. DLL hijacking is a very common initial injection point for malware. So it could be used at an entry point to start a more complex attack. Right now, though, we actually haven't seen it. I don't know. Has that changed? Mayra might be able to tell us if that's changed since last night. But as of last night, we hadn't seen this exploited in the wild yet. I want to call out yet because I just showed you how easy this is to actually execute. It's simple. It's like dead simple. And POCs are all over GitHub. I'll just walk you through real quick a bit what it looks like in the network traffic. This is really simple. You can see there's an RPC, DCE RPC call. I don't know if y'all can see my mouse, but so on the left, you can see there's a DCE RPC call. There is a spools S protocol below that with an add printer driver EX. That DCE IP call or DCE RPC call, you can see down at the bottom, the interface is the spools S UUID. So you use a specific UUID, and then you can see in the actual spools subsystem, they're calling the add printer driver EX command or operation. So, and then unfortunately, you can see everything after that is encrypted. It's not using standard TLS. This is a specific encryption for this RPC call. So we'd have to, our product right now don't really decrypt that stub. So what we have is for filter protection. We are looking for the RPC calls being used and then the operations for any of those three operations. And they're tied to the specific UUIDs, the specific UP or RPC calls. We aren't looking in the encrypted subtraffic. So all of these filters are going to be policy filters. That's going to be true for anyone who can provide protection for this. Like I said, though, we don't see these actually showing up very often. So what I'd suggest doing is making sure that all of these are enabled in your environment. All of the rules are enabled. You can set them up to a block. Worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to stop someone from installing a new printer and new printer drivers. It's going to be mildly annoying, but I would suggest making sure they're enabled and then tracking down when you do see them fire and see how and see if it's legitimate and add an exception. Just because right now we're not seeing it exploited, but I can't imagine that's going to last for very long. So there is a link here at the bottom to the knowledge base. You can also just search PrintNightmare TrendMicro knowledge base to get a list of all the solutions that we have. I didn't mention earlier, there are lots of print spooler bugs coming to light. I would expect to see that for the next few months. Anytime a very large, high-profile bug like this comes out, it starts getting slammed by all the research community. So we're going to see a ton of these. Are we going to see a lot of these that are going to be network exploitable? Extremely unlikely. I'd imagine that we don't see any more that are network exploitable. It's possible, but unlikely. But the press is pretty much guaranteed to say every single one of them is PrintNightmare. It's not true. Even 1675, which is everybody's calling PrintNightmare, it's not. So yeah, just a couple of examples of that. So you've probably seen this bug. It came out yesterday. It was 34481. It's all over the press. People are calling it PrintNightmare. It's local privilege escalation. So already, you know, it's not RCE. It's not network. Even the discoverer was on Twitter and was saying, this is a completely unique bug. Don't call it PrintNightmare. But press is still calling it PrintNightmare. Same is true with Hive Nightmare. The discoverer even felt like they needed to give it a unique name. But again, it's local privilege escalation. and it's getting all the press. The Hive Nightmare was the one that was in Mimikatz. Yeah, that I would just expect to see this for a while. I also recommend turning on all the filters. Check out that knowledge base. And that's it for me. I'm going to pass it to Mayra now. And she is going to talk about the actual field and what they're seeing. Mayra? Oh, did we? Oh, there you are.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the underground economy of exploits, which I'll also talk about the PrintNightmare. So right now, PrintNightmare in the underground, actors are willing to pay between $2,000 to $5,000 for a working exploit. Currently, there's no exploit for sale. Actors are asking for PowerShell code or DLL or an executable file. Some forum users do not want to update their Windows. They're worried that they themselves will be targeted by other criminals. And right now, there's currently many technical discussions on how to resolve this issue. The two graphics you see here, one on the left, this is a person advertising that they're looking to buy this PrintNightmare, and they're willing to pay up to $2,000. And then on the right is from an English language forum, and they're just having a discussion on what PrintNightmare is for other users. So some of the most requested exploits by cyber criminals, the exploits for Microsoft products were the most requested, such as Microsoft Office, Windows, Remote Desktop, Internet Explorer, and SharePoint, and they make up 47% of that, while exploits for IoT products made up 5%. And we expect IoT devices to be more lucrative targets as malicious actors because of their ever-increasing number of connected devices out there. The average price people are willing to pay was $2,000 for a requested exploit. And we found that 52% of exploits were less than 2 years old. So currently there's 51% of exploits that target Microsoft products. So you can see there's a comparison of what criminals are looking for and what they're also buying. Most of these products are specifically for Office and Adobe. The underground market is dominated by end days, no longer by 0 days, and 54% of the exploits sold in the underground were 2 years old. So a quick overview of what a life cycle of an exploit is in the underground. It starts off with the developer presents a proof of concept for an exploit or creates a working exploit. Then a malicious actor or government weaponizes the exploit, keeping it a secret if necessary. Sellers then offer the exploit in the underground. A security researcher or a participant in a bug bounty program discovers this vulnerability being exploited. The affected vendor becomes aware of the vulnerability. Then we have the vendor create and release a patch for the vulnerability. And then cyber criminals either continue selling this patch exploit for an additional 2 or more years, or the price is lowered and eventually it'll stop being sold in the underground. So an example of a life cycle here is CVE 2020-9054, which was peddled since February of 2020, as you can see in the figure. The zero exploit was advertised in a Russian forum for $20,000. And eventually, after 6 months, it went down to $2,000. And this specific exploit was a Zyxel network attached storage vulnerability that allowed remote code execution. Another example, CV 2016-5195. Some people know this as Dirty Cow. It's one of the oldest vulnerabilities that we were able to find sold in the underground. And you can see that it first started in November 2016, and as of May 2020, it was still being used and sold in the underground. It started off as $3,000, and it's still being sold as high as that currently in the underground. So outdated vulnerabilities are still targeted in 2021. We're seeing that 22% of the exploits sold in the underground are 3+ years. We're also seeing 48% of the requested exploits more than 3 years old. WannaCry is still being sold in the underground after all these years. And using Shodan, we looked into it and saw that at least 600,000 systems are still vulnerable to this. And there's currently some ransomware groups that are using WannaCry. And that's it. Eric?
Okay, thank you, Mayra. Sorry, I was muted there, so a bad habit after all this time. Should be able to do that. There's been some questions here, and I do want to address it around how do I know if have devices that are susceptible to this vulnerability or other vulnerabilities here. So just want to show real quick and actually put this in a couple of the responses. If you go into the risk insights here, this is the screen. Don't know if everybody's seen this before or not, but this is a screen that will show you your current environment and all the different types of risk have been detected within that. One of the categories, as we've been talking about here, is vulnerabilities. So I certainly can specify vulnerability detection here. And this will show me all the vulnerabilities that were detected within my environment, from all the different sensors I may have. This is the main CVE, PrintNightmare we've been discussing here today. So I certainly can select this here. And it shows me right away the protections, that are available. So you can see here, it gives me the rule IDs, in Cloud and Workload Security or Deep Security within Apex One, Deep Discovery Inspector. Also the identity here, for the scan. It gives me references about the vulnerability. So maybe if I wasn't, familiar with it, I could go and, look out here in GitHub or the different sources and get information on it. But more importantly, I can collect this devices option here, and it shows me the devices within my environment that are susceptible to this. So I can see here that, I do have these devices here, which this CVE was detected on. So that is how I could go and specify how that was done. There was a couple questions here as well. I think we can probably answer live here since we have a few minutes. Are you still there, Cory?
Absolutely.
Okay. There was several questions that are coming across wanting to know the differences between like IDS and IPS. I actually think you probably saw a couple of them yourself. It looked like you might have answered one. But I think it might be good maybe to mention that the rules are in the detect mode. And also maybe why the protection is in this area versus some of the other functions, if that makes sense. There seem to be several questions around that.
Yeah, so first off, real quick, IDS versus IPS, real simple. One only detects traffic and the other blocks, or can block. This rule for the most part is shipped in detect mode, and that's entirely because of the known false positives. We don't want to make that decision for our customers typically. We don't want to say, hey, look, this is going to false positive, but we think it's worth it. Each organization is going to be different. We typically, if we're going to block something, we don't enable it by default if it's going to stop legitimate traffic. That's why I wanted to call out, go in, make sure that if you're okay with that risk, that you're enabling these filters in a block mode. It's really all about your organization. Some organizations are going to say, that's unacceptable. We use printers every day. We have people moving site to site. That's not acceptable. And I understand that. There are others that are going to say, that's fine, whatever. We're willing to accept that. It's really just up to y'all. So I really just suggest, if you're okay with it, go in and set them to block. You're probably not going to see it a lot. Maybe just check and see how often you're seeing it right now and use that as a guidepost.
All right. Thanks, Cory. Also, while we have some time here, I do want to remind people we do have an upcoming webinar. Oops, I'm not sure I'm sharing my screen. Hold on, let me fix that. Sorry here. We do have an upcoming webinar that's going coming up on July 29th. It's going to be hosted by John Clay, who's our Director of Global Threat Communications. There's a QR code on the screen you can scan. They'll take you to the registration site. The URL is also on here. Would recommend, if you're interested in that, please sign up. Also want to make sure everybody does have the information, from this webinar, as well as the others we've been doing within this series. Myself, Cory's and Mayra's emails are all here. There's a QR code. Again, they'll take you to the breach detection site. This is also where all the recordings and everything will be posted. So highly recommend that you go to that site and check that out. We try to get the recordings out just as quickly as we can. So with that, we actually, looks like we actually did keep things to what we're hoping to, about 30 minutes, which is good. Feel free, since we do have a few minutes, to continue to ask questions if you want. We can stick around for a minute or two here. If we didn't get to yours, certainly follow up. Feel free to email any of us here as well. Be more than happy to follow up with anybody. So with that, thank you very much for joining. Do appreciate it, and hope to be able to see everybody in an upcoming event. Thanks so much.